Hi everyone, so we're gonna have another Excel lesson in this one. This is very useful for everyone working in the HR, or if you are keeping track of records for different regions or different people. This is actually a special one because it was requested by one of you guys. Renz Gamboa reached out to me via our Facebook page, and she asked if I could help her with what she's doing on a monthly basis or a per cut-off basis for her company. So she sent me a sample of her worksheet and what she wants to be the end result. So I kind of changed it up a bit to hide the names and the other details. So if you just drop by and you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing because we're gonna churn out more lessons in the days to come. And if you have special requests, you can get in touch with me via the comment section down below or via the Facebook page Coach Chubby. So check it out and send me a message. And you can email requests as well to coachchubby@gmail.com. So if you have any specific Excel problem you want us to tackle, please do that. So anyway, the main goal of the channel is to make it as simple as it can get for you guys. So um, for this specific request, we're not doing macros. We're not doing a lot of conditional formulas just because I want Renz, who requested for help, to be able to maintain this file moving forward. The problem with macros is once it's programmed a specific way, unless you have VBA knowledge or if you have any contact with the person who drafted the VBA script, the moment that a little change happens, the macro might give you a headache and it might stop working. So for this one, I opted to go and just find or formulate formulas that may appear simple but logical, and you can actually use it to apply to different Excel forms that you may need. So there are several phases or several steps for us to create this payroll to payslip file. So let me show you a copy of the data. So this is for the raw data that they use. So you have a date, a route, and then you have a specific code. I think this might be a delivery code. I don't know the nature of the business. Probably that. It's probably a logistics business. So you have the plate for the cars, and then you have the driver, and I think this is the location. So these are the data that Renz plans to compile, or she actually, I think, formulates a payslip. So the output for each month is something that looks like this, the payslip. And she told me via email that what she does is she filters this out per driver and then copies it manually to this template right here. So you have the driver and then you have the rates. So the rates, we'll assume that it's a fixed rate, so 550 per item, and then 100 plus 100, so 650. We will not change these rates. We will just find a way for her to be able to summarize it faster than she is already doing, which is manually copying and pasting. One more thing about that, if you do it manually, it's prone to human error. So one thing that you don't want to do wrong is people's pay. Or so if this is related to some employee getting more than what he or she deserves or less than what he or she deserves, then God forbid, you might be out of a job the next time. So this is very sensitive information, and we want to eliminate human error, and that is to eliminate human intervention in the manual processes. So the first step for me, I think, is to determine if there is one keyword or one convention that we can use to identify each line item. And for this, because the driver is I think the driver column should be the identifier because we create one payslip per one driver. But if you're, for example, summarizing the trips taken to Marilao, which is a location or a depot, you can do so and use this as your deciding factor. But for us, because we're making a payslip, we're gonna use the driver as your identifier. So the easiest way to summarize this data and to make it easy to manipulate is to create a pivot table. So I will click Insert and create a pivot table. So I will select the range, click OK. So a new worksheet with a pivot table appears. So I can rename this pivot. And for the filters, I want to create one tab per driver. So the driver would be my filter. And the data I need would be the data here in the payslip, which is the date, route, DTR number, plate number. So DTR number, and then plate number. So I have those four. But just to make it easier for me to translate this to the columns on the payslip, I'm gonna go to the pivot table design, and then click report layout, click show in tabular form. So what it does is it shows the pivot data in a tabular form. So if you look here, so instead of going from top to bottom for all the data, it spreads it out to one column per row identifier on your pivot table fields. And then I will remove the subtotals. You can actually click it here and just don't show subtotals, but I was just showing you that you can do that also manually if you want to look at it a different way. So like that. Okay, just because I'm used to using an older version of Excel, I'm just gonna, and just so you can see how it looks on your Excel, I just selected I selected the pivot table options and selected I just checked the classic pivot table layout just so it kind of looks familiar to everyone who might be using an older version of Excel. So anyway, so this is how it looks. And now I'm gonna change it up and click here in the report layout and select repeat all item labels, so that per line item the date will still appear. And in case there are multiple iterations of like the location, as long as there's a difference in the code and in the plate number, it will still appear, and all the data will be complete per line. That's because we want to be able to feed complete data to our end result, which is the payslip. So we have it here. Okay, so now that we've formatted our pivot table, our next step is to split this up into different tabs. And this is a very, very useful trick. And to do that, so there's one function for Excel for pivot tables where you can show filter reports, and that is, let's get to that. Just click your pivot table, go to analyze, and so pivot table, and then the options drop down. You will see here the show report filter pages. Just click on that. So because the driver is our identifier and we used it as a filter, it will appear here that all pages of driver will appear, and Excel will magically split the data like this. So I will click OK. So Excel magically or intelligently created a tab per driver code. So as you can see here, all this is filtered out to show driver Abridwin. So it's a code, so it doesn't make sense. But just imagine that that's a name of a driver, and it did so for all the rest of the drivers. So once you have this, actually you can stop here and just copy paste using this data, but let's not stop there when we can push it a bit further. And we're doing this for rents. So you have all the driver field names here, and Excel created them prior to the pivot, the original data that we have. So let's close that for now. So now we have this data and we have a pivot. Then we have one driver per tab. So the next goal is to create or find a way for Excel to be able to populate the payslip template here with the data from the corresponding driver. For example, if I want to use the driver Tumakante, and this payslip is actually a payslip for Tumakante, I want Excel to be able to fill out all these 4 columns with the corresponding data that matches. So I want Excel to fill out these 4 columns with the data coming from the Tumakante pivot over here. So how will I do that? So Excel actually can refer to specific tabs without creating an error in case of tab deletion. So for example, let me go back and explain it in an easier way. For example, I have Tumakante as a tab here, and for now, for this run, I'm gonna link my data easily. So I'm gonna click equals and refer to the first line here, so A5, and go down. So A5, sorry. So A5 going down, just copy that and paste that moving forward. And then just copy and do the same for all the 4 columns like that. Just make this general and not a date. Something like that. And then I will put a formula here that equals if the plate is not zero or is not blank, I'm gonna put 550. If not, I'm gonna put blank. Something like that. So what if I paste that down, that will happen. And I'm gonna do the same formula here. If this is greater than 0, then it is 100, and if not, it's a blank. For example, let's do that. So that might work for one month or for one round. My problem would be, what if for the next month, so I'm gonna do the file all over again. I'm gonna make one more run. So I'm gonna summarize all my data and create a pivot. So this time I would have to relink. So because the first part would be to delete all this and then create a new batch of tabs based on this pivot, right? And what will happen is if this specific tab will be deleted, you can see here the reference error because Excel won't be able to match the data. That is why I will introduce one formula to you guys, and that formula is indirect. So the indirect formula will tell Excel to read a reference based off of something. It may be a cell value or a hard-coded value, and just base the data on that. So what will happen is, instead of manually clicking on the cell to match this date or this route and so on and so forth, I can tell Excel to find a tab that is labeled Tumakante and just pull the data from that. So anytime changes are made or anytime you want to add a person, Excel will be able to understand your formula. So to do that, let me just take back, or let's just bring back the Tumakante tab. Okay. So as I said, now that I have the Tumakante tab back, I want Excel to understand that when I'm saying it has to go to field A5, I want it to go to the tab tumakante. And the way to do that is to use the indirect formula. So I just cleaned up the file really quick and removed all the references and updated the conditionals here. So yeah, so we're ready right now. So what we're gonna do is click equals, type indirect. So what I'm actually telling Excel is that you should understand the reference text here as a separate entity and not calculate it yet. Okay, so I'll key in an opening quote, apostrophe, end quote. And that is because when we're referencing tabs, the way Excel understands is there's a apostrophe and then the tab name, exclamation point, apostrophe, and then the cell number. So that's how Excel kind of understands it. So apostrophe, tab name or sheet name, and apostrophe, and then the exclamation point, and you have your location. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I will click. So I already have in between the quotes. Already have the first apostrophe. So I will click enter, and then I will refer to cell G2 and tell him this is what I mean. I'm gonna block in the code here because I want the same formula to apply to the succeeding cells. And then I'm gonna give it the necessary exclamation. Okay, so now that we have the apostrophe, then the exclamation point, I'm gonna key in A5 and then close it out. So you see here, it already read January 1, 20. Okay, so that's how it works. The problem with the indirect is if I drag it down or if I use copy paste, you can see the A5 here, it will not automatically change to A6 and A7, A8 going down. So it doesn't apply. So what I can do is create a cheat sheet for it to use as the identifier. So I can actually use another sheet, or just for explanation purposes, I can just put here A5, A6, and so and so forth. I think A17 is the best. Let's just leave it at A18. So what I can do is replace this A5 and just use end and then refer to this. So because the K1 is outside of the quotations, yeah, because the K1 on the formula is outside the quotations, you can see that when I move the formula down, this is K2, this is K3. So Excel understands that there's logically it just moves down like that. So now we've populated the dates. So using the same concept, I can just copy the formula. I have two options actually. I can use a B5 here and just create a code again, just like that. Or I can just change this up and include the letter. For example, I want to make it easier. I can use 5, 6 here, just the numbers. So this, I'm just showing you different ways to do it, but you can decide what you want to do. So because this is using A5, I can just put the B next to the exclamation and refer to 5 like that. So what happens is, because the B is inside the quotations, what the indirect function is telling Excel is that I want it to display equals and then apostrophe tumakante apostrophe exclamation, and then B, and then because I clicked L1, 5. See? So this is equal to this. So that's how the indirect formula works. And I can do the same for all the others. So I will just, let me just drag this so I can, let's lock in the column here just to make it easier to populate the other formulas. So I can move that here, and then instead of B, I'm gonna change it to C. So I'm gonna use general here because it's, yeah, there. So just like that. So it's very easy. Move it to here. But for this one, instead of C, I want it to display the plate. So I'm gonna select D. So just to show you, so the D is the plate, like that, and drag it down. So one limitation would be you have to have at least a maximum number of trips or number of lines. So at least if you know that no driver will exceed 60 per month, just create 60 lines so that you can use the formula. So you can use the maximum lines so that it won't run out. Okay. And the cool thing about this is, for example, if I'm making a payslip for a separate person, I'm just gonna copy this and create another payslip. I'm just gonna copy. So I'm gonna create a copy of the same sheet, but for example, I'm gonna put it next to the, if I'm gonna make a payslip for someone else, I'm gonna make this for Sumayod. If I rename this, so this is a different tab, Sumayod. So I'm gonna type Sumayod. You see here, it actually pulled from the Sumayod tab, which only has one trip. So that's really cool because you can create unlimited copies or one payslip per person and just maintain it that way. But as you can see, one limitation would be that because it's referring to a pivot table, you have a grand total. So here for Sumayod, you have a grand total here with the blanks. Of course, we don't want the payslip to show grand total, and we don't want it to show zeros when there is no more succeeding lines, because your zero might be understood as a rate and it's just totally messed up. So what I usually do to do that is I will put an error, a conditional formula. So I can put here if for example, so it's the same formula here. If this, so I'm gonna copy that first. So if this is equal to grand total, which means that it's the end of the pivot table, I'm just gonna put blank. But if not, it will calculate and display what I want it to display, which is the date. So I'm gonna copy that formula down, just drag it down here, and you can see the for the line that is grand total, it's not appearing. But you have a problem because for all the blanks, it's still showing 0. What you can do here is to create another condition, which is if outside, if it's equal to blank, then blank. And if not, copy this whole thing that's inside the parenthesis and just click enter. So let's try to drag it out. Let's see. There. So it's displaying a blank for all the others. So now if I use this, the same concept, I'm just going to apply to the next one. So I'm going to put the if and then refer to, so there is no grand total anyway. So the grand total, if you look at the pivots, the last line would always be, doesn't matter how many line items you have, the last line will always be grand total and they're blank. So it doesn't matter. For the columns B to D, you only have to put in the conditional formula for the blanks. So if this is equal to a blank, then put in a blank, and if not, use the formula. So I'm gonna use that for all, and see, it disappears. And I'm gonna use the same concept for the rest of the formulas. I'm just gonna change this up to C, there, general, and drag it down. And here I'm gonna use D, so it's column D, and then drag it down. So there you go. So now I have a tab that calculates it correctly. So for example, let's delete this first because this does not have the conditionals. So if I'm gonna add one more person, I'm just gonna copy this create a copy of the tab and put it there. So I can click, let's put back to Macante, and rename the driver to Macante, and it will populate the data. So as you can see, I mistakenly put in the name on the designation field. So instead of so I just need to cut. So use Control X or Command X and paste it on the employee name, and you see the indirect formula follows that cut cell. But if you only use copy and you delete this, it won't work. So anytime you want the formulas to refer to a different cell, just cut the original reference and then paste it, and it will work fine. So that worked fine, and I can do the same for here and just move on from there. So that's how you can do this. You can create payslips for all your employees. And the best thing about how this formula is set up and this payslip is set up is that, for example, I'm done with printing all my January trips and I have a new one. I can just simply delete all the previous data. I can delete all the tabs created by the filter. So as you can see, there's so much data here. I can just delete all these. And even with my current payslips, I will not do anything anymore because these are all prepared. These are all ready to remap this and change the data source to your, for example, your February data, and just do the same thing. Just click this, and then pivot table options. Oops, sorry. Pivot table and drop down, show report filter pages. Click OK. So will generate the same set of different tabs per driver. And if you go to your payslip, yeah, so as you can see, it repopulated the data. So that means all Renz has to do is paste the data on the trips tab and then refresh the data here, and the payslips will automatically populate. And one more thing that's very helpful for this type of formula, if you're not using macros and you're using this indirect formula instead, is at any point when a new employee joins, you can just create another payslip tab for that employee. And when you're ready, just select all the sheets that you want to print, and you can print this. So I hope this works for you. I hope you learned something new here. For me personally, my favorite part is learning about the report filters, because it's so easy to just extract all the data depending on the filter. It's so helpful, especially if you're running a report for different regions, running a report for different items, and it's just not limited to payroll stuff. And so the highlights of the lesson would be that the report filters and the indirect formula. And just by using those formulas, I think we're able to help Renz with her payroll needs and generating payslips for the trip data per month. So I hope you learned something new, and if you have any Excel lessons that you want me to talk about, if you have specific requests, please hit me up via the comment section down below. If you like the video, please give me a like, share it to your friends, share it to your workmates. If you're a manager, share it to your team members. Maybe they can learn something. And I hope that this lesson helps you be a better person today than you were yesterday. Join me on the next videos. Subscribe to the channel, please. Give me a like, hit that notification bell icon so you'll be notified for the next lesson. And I hope you have a grand time, and I hope you excel in Excel. God bless. Good night. Bye.